Okay, welcome everybody to the seventh. Doesn't time fly when you're having fun? The seventh Software Design Simplified stream. And today we have Byron, the author of this Go project that we were talking about last week. We have Byron here in person. So that should be interesting. And I just want to give a little bit of a recap for those who haven't seen the previous streams and who aren't familiar with what we're trying to do here. So what do we have here? We have a fairly sizable project written in Go. And if we go to the roots, no pun intended, you can see here are all the roots. It's an API. And we have these various endpoints: petty cash, payment request, invoices, purchase orders, roles, user roles. And we have user roles, and we have payments and payment approvals and all sorts of stuff in this API. And what we are going to do is focus on a specific change in the API that we need to make that was in one of these to-do comments that I believe I've deleted now. And it was in this approve payment request. So in order to approve a payment request, you could be any user in the system, just a regular user. In the system, there is this concept of users, and every user has a user role. And so if you are in a specific role, you have certain permissions, and if you're not, then you don't. So last time we concentrated on writing this test, given a user who's not an admin, when making a payment request, making a payment request approval request. That's not very good. Requesting a payment approval, then return unauthorized. And if I run that test now, you'll see that it passes. And let's run all the tests. And you'll see one of them fails and the rest all pass. Now, the reason this fails is because we have actually changed the functionality. And I was in two minds about how to approach this last week. There was an existing test called Test Payments Approval API Approved for Any User, which was implementing or testing the wrong behavior. We don't want any user to be approved. We only want people who are admins to be approved. So the first port of call is get back to green as soon as we possibly can. Now, I've just changed that test name, so I'm going to commit that. Okay. And we'll just say better name, and that is committed. Okay. So let's jump into this. Now, Byron has already said to me that he would like to sorry, those messages always distract me. He would very much like to talk about the design of the overall system, because he said that all of these things here are an indication that the system is too difficult to set up. And I would totally agree with that. If you follow a guy called Gary Bernhardt, he talks about such things as rectangular tests. And so you can see here, don't know if you can see my cursor on the live stream, but we have a great big whopping vertical. It looks like a black skyscraper of death here. Black skyscraper of death. And we don't want a black skyscraper of death. We want something that looks like that. So it's much squarer. And really, ideally, we want a 3-line test. That's really what we're going for. In the ideal world, 3-line test. Now, we do not live in an ideal world, and sometimes it's not even desirable to have exactly 3 lines. But the 3 parts we want are arrange, as we said last week, act, and assert. And very often I see this kind of thing, which is actually setting up expectations, which means that these asserts, an expectation is really an assertion of a behavior. So we're starting to mingle asserts with the arrange, which immediately makes the test much more difficult to read than it needs to be. So we're setting up a store. That's okay. That's arrange. And then you've got this, which is assert, assert, assert. You've got arrange, you've got assert, and then you've got act, and then you've got assert again. So it's all higgledy-piggledy, isn't it? So mocking, I'm not a fan of mocking. I don't really do it that much anymore, except in emergencies. We're going to stick with the mocking right now, but we will, at the end of this session, talk a little bit about the alternatives. I did cover one or two of them last week. Dependency injection is a big one. VCR is another one that may make sense. Using the real database is another one that may make sense. And my favorite, my current obsession is something called nullable architecture. So all that said, let's focus on getting this test passing. So whenever we are off the green path, whenever any test is failing, I am very, very, very nervous. And that's because all tests should be green at all times, because if they're not green, your software is not releasable. And the longer your software is releasable for, the more options things have for going wrong. If this was not releasable right now and there was a production outage, guess what? We can't roll anything back if we're on the main branch right now. I know we're not. You could argue, oh, well, you might be on a branch off of main, in which case we can always go back into main and roll it back. But the problem is we really want very, very short-lived branches. And anytime there is a failing test, it immediately prevents our ability to deploy code. So we don't like this. I only had an hour last week, so I had no other option but to leave it red. But I did not feel good about myself. I went home and cried into a little teacup. I didn't actually, I'm lying. But yeah, it wasn't a great move. So let's get this back to green. And the reason I say all this blah, blah, blah is not to waste more time. It's to say that we don't want to, I don't like the name of this test, but I'm not going to fiddle around with it because our ultimate priority is getting this back to green as soon as we possibly can. And that means we need to think about what's the simplest way of getting it to green as soon as we possibly can. And that means I would suggest we need to do something related to this get user roles mock, I think. I think we want to mock out, we want to pretend that we have an admin user here. And if we pretend we have an admin user, there's a reasonable chance this is going to pass. So let's just refresh our memories about how this code works. So you've got approved payment request. We're getting the user ID from the context. This code is big time in need of refactoring, but let's continue. If it's got 0 roles, you get 401. You don't have permission. It is, okay, that's a bad request. So this is an error in binding the request JSON. So I'm guessing this is if it doesn't have a JSON body, maybe, or something like that. Then we say approve payment request params, status admin ID, approval date, request ID. So this is interesting. There doesn't look like there's anything that's specifically saying if they have this role. They just need to have more than one role, which is interesting. So if we're going to
Oh, so can I say something there? So
Please.
what it does is the roles are ranked 0, 1, 2, 3. So 0 is
Okay.
the most basic. So if it's
Okay.
0, they are the basic users. They can't approve payments. So
Okay.
if they have something higher than that, they are maybe admin or secretary according to the way the database was set, and they can approve payment requests.
I'm going to try and reduce my talking level because I certainly don't want to be talking over you. Sorry about that, Byron. So that's great feedback. Thank you. What would you suggest we do to these two lines to pretend that they have any roles? Now, actually, we don't want that as behavior, do we? We don't want it just to say if there is more than one role, then let them through, but just to get us rolling, to get the test passing, what's the simplest thing we could do? Would it be to put something in this array here or something? How would it work? I think you're on mute.
I'm on
I know.
mute. I think our mock should return something greater than 1, not a nil, not a 0.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so it would be here, would it?
Yes.
And what, because I'm not that familiar with Go, would it be kind of that?
No, no, no. No, that will shout at you. I think it should just be a 2 or a 3, just like that, without the brackets.
Ah, okay. Interesting. Oh, nice. Okay, let's give it a go. That'd be kind of cool if it was just remove the nil and put a three in. Wrong type of argument one to return. Int is not assignable to error.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
that is
so
it.
that should be nil. The empty user role should be 3. Yeah.
Okay. So where do I put the three? Is it in here?
Maybe. Yeah.
Let's give it a
Run it
go
and see what happens.
and see. That's the wonderful thing about tests. Wrong type of argument zero to return. Three is not assignable to user role. I'm just going to do is cheat a little bit and see if there's anything anywhere else in the code. Ah, is that useful? Maybe not.
We
Okay.
can define a variable,
Okay.
db role equals to an int 3, and then we pass it here. Because when you, yeah,
Now, would I do that?
your brackets are mismatched. No, just
Why don't I give you remote control? Um, I'm in Vim mode, so I'll put it into insert mode because I know not everybody's that much of a fan of Vim. Can you see it? Can you accept it?
How can I open my Goland? If you shared at the right corner of there is a button for sharing your session. So I can, yeah. So if you
This
click
might.
that,
Okay.
yeah, start a session.
If this works, I'll be absolutely gobsmacked. We'll give this like 10 seconds. I never like to do these kind of things because you spend half an hour messing around with the software. Oh my gosh. Whoa. Holy mackerel. That's cool. Can you control it, Byron?
You've not sent the link. Where's the link? In the chat. They should provide you with a link, copy session link. Yeah.
Copy session link. All right, cool. So let me just pop that in the chat.
Okay.
I got really excited there. I thought it was working.
Let me open my Goland. And then
And you mute yourself. Sorry, Byron, I've had to mute you. There was a lot of feedback there.
So in the meantime, may I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, you mentioned about you don't really like milk. Can you elaborate a little bit about it?
What was that, Clarielle? You're just cutting out there a little bit.
Oh, I said you mentioned that you don't really like milk, and I was wondering, like, may you elaborate a little bit about that point?
Yeah, totally. Why do I not like mocks? Here, we are implementing, we're essentially setting up an expectation on a specific method, right? Do you understand how mocks work, first of all?
okay, so while I'm downloading the client, it takes a long time, some time to download, so around 3 minutes. I also wrote that question down that she's asking. So Mike, to add on top of that, so before you can answer, so let's say when you're mocking the database side, you have an interface of the database as it is, and you're doing a reflection on that, right? So why is mocking not appropriate, or why don't you like it in that case? Yet it's just a reflection. If you were to connect a real database, it will still function the same.
So the reason I tend to stay away from mocks is because you're testing the implementation, not the behavior. So if this method name is being called and you expect this method name to be called, if all of a sudden we decide we don't like this method name and we change it, this test is going to break. And so what you tend to have is your production code is coupled to your tests through these names. So if the production code changes, all your tests are going to go poof in a big ball of smoke. And now if you've set up this expectation once or twice, it's no big deal. And there's refactoring tools in Golang to help you do that. Okay, maybe not that big a deal. But if it's in 100 places, or you don't have an IDE, the IDE isn't able to detect. If the IDE isn't able to detect all the places that it's changed, then you're left with this kind of half-broken bit of software, and it really slows you down. The other thing is that if you then change the behavior of the system to call the database 4 times or 6 times or 8 times, guess what you've got to do? You've now got to replicate those 8 times in every single one of your tests. And this is the kind of thing that slows teams down. I've seen it a lot. And so every time, what you really want to be able to do is refactor your internal workings fearlessly. And so long as everything works the same as it did before, all the tests should just pass. So I don't have much patience with this session thing. We're just gonna figure out how to do it ourselves, because time's ticking on. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to ask ChatGPT how to create a DB user role, unless a user role is a struct. Okay, so we need to create a new struct. ID. Is it ID maybe? No, it doesn't like that either. Okay, so just going to copy and paste that. into here.
Create an empty variable var db var role equals to var role db of the type db role.
Okay.
Yeah, var role, and then give it a type db dot role. And then now you can start assigning values. Yeah, like that. Oh no, it's misbehaving. Yeah, I think I'm in.
Can you control the cursor, Byron?
Yeah.
Just going to put you on mute again. Hey, we have liftoff. Okay, cool. It still hates you. I see. Okay, cool. So that's a role. Sorry, Byron, I muted you just because you were getting some feedback. Okay, so that's the role. So we're going to do, we want this role to be set in here. Do I out just asking ChatGPT. DB role to not be empty. Okay, I see. So what we do now is we say role, and we'll do that again. And we need it to be ID is 1, like that, I believe. Look, screaming at me. Why does it not like that? Just hang on, I'm just going to do role equals db.role ID 1.
Yeah.
Admin. Okay, no red squiggles. Let's run it. Wrong type. DB role is not assignable. I think it's because it needs to be in an array. Coming back with an interface for user ID. Wow. Okay. It wouldn't be that, would it? I suspect not. So I'm going to copy and paste this. Wrong type of argument 0 into ChatGPT. Error message suggests you're trying to return a DB role object where a square brackets DB user role is expected. Ah, hang on. It was a square brackets DB user role, wasn't it? Aha, not just a role, a user role. That's a bit we're missing, folks, I think. Okay. Let's try that. DB rule is not assignable. Okay, this is what ChatGPT is telling me. So I'm literally just going to copy and paste it in. And we'll see what happens. Mock user roles. Do the same for that. It doesn't like that. Unknown role. So I'm going to get rid of that. See if that works. Hey, there we go. And we get our user roles are array, and that's our logging message. So I know that was painful. Sorry about that, but this is what happens when you don't know the programming language like I don't do. So we've got it back to green. So we're really going to just desperately commit anything. I don't care what it looks like. The fact that we're back on green is an excellent bit of progress there. Test back to green. Okay, before we go any further, I gave a whole load of waffle to you, Clariel, about the disadvantage with mocks. What questions do you have about that? You surely got some questions. I was talking about it coupling the implementation to the behavior. So rather the test to the production code. So if, as an example, if we went into this make payment request approval request, which is a name that we definitely need to fix. Hang on. That's not doing the major bit of the work, is it? Create random payment request. This is making the actual call to payment request approve. That's right. So if we go into payments.go, which is a production code, and you see we call get user roles here, and we also call get user roles in the middleware at a higher level. So we're calling get user roles twice. And if we suddenly decide to remove this instance of get user roles and push it into the middleware, which we could do, there's no point in calling it twice. That's silly. In fact, I'll show you. Let's do that actual thing, because currently we are coming into this approved payment request and we're doing authorization here. And authorization should not be done in this handler. It should be done in a cross-cutting concern. This handler is now responsible for more than one thing. It's responsible for approving the payment request and doing all of that jazz and getting the user and all the rest of it. And it's also responsible for making sure the user is an admin, which he shouldn't be. Because if all of a sudden you change the rules for who's an admin, now this has to change. Now other spots in the code potentially have to change. So what we're going to do is go to roots. What I noticed here is we have a way of adding extra middleware into these roots. So we're going to add a new bit of middleware that authenticates admins. And we're going to move that functionality to do with authenticating admins from here. We're going to rip all of this nonsense out and we're going to push it into the middleware. So this endpoint here, this function rather, is not going to know anything about an admin or not. Is that clear? Does that make sense? So we're going to go to roots. I can see this auth middleware, which looks promising. So let's have a look at that. This is authorization. It's checking a bunch of fields. And we have some current user middleware. I'm looking for the get user role. There's get user by username or ID. And interestingly, user roles, get user roles. So we're calling get user roles here. And we're also calling get user roles in the production code, and we don't want that. So we're going to change the design of it so that we're going to create some new authorization middleware that detects for admins. Okay, but of course that is going to involve us calling get user roles potentially in a second place. So this is a bit of middleware for current user middleware. Wonder what happens if they're not if they're not authorized, it does this abort with status JSON thing. Okay. Okay, I think I see. So what we're going to do is create a new bit of server middleware. And we're going to call it must be admin middleware. And we're going to just very, very gently, without breaking any of our existing code, we're going to test it out. So this is auth routes, and we want a new auth route that has this middleware built into it before it even gets to this payment request approve. So I'm going to see if I can just put some middleware into this route here. So if I do use, and I do this middleware that I've just created here, must be admin middleware. Let's see what this can do. So here we had server.use current middleware, current user middleware. So I'm just going to follow the same pattern. Okay, and we're going to run our tests again. We're going to run all the tests this time because all of them should pass. Okay, missing return. So this is good. We're going to literally just copy this pattern. I don't know much about it, but I'm just going to fairly mindlessly copy it and do a return. And we'll run the tests again. Okay. Interesting. It says already bind already in use. Fail. It doesn't really, it's not really telling me why it's failing. That's kind of interesting. Let's hit it again. It's panicking. So I've done something very, very wrong here.
I think the server is running in some context.
So I think what we want to do is c.next.
Yeah.
Because c.next will call the next bit of middleware down. I think. Let's see. No, it still doesn't like it. Failing go routine after. That's interesting, isn't it?
Is the server running anywhere? Because when it's panicking, port 8085 is already in use. It's trying to bind to that port when it's running the tests, and it is finding it busy.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So maybe you change this to, because you're running it in a Go routine here, you can change it to maybe 8086 so that you run it in a different port.
I don't think that's going to solve the problem, because I think it's just going to find it on a different port then. The problem is it's not properly shutting down, and it's something to do with what we've just done.
Okay.
So if I just undo this, I think it's something to do with that middleware is my hypothesis. But it could well be not. Yeah, okay. Server is already in use. Okay. So let's just try and find another server and see. No. Doesn't like any of these ports. Interesting. So we'll just put it back to 5. I'm just going to see what we've actually changed. Sample code. That's all that we've changed. So I'm going to git stash. And I bet you any money if it still does that same error. Yeah, it really does. That's really interesting. So what if I just run just this? Just that passes. Just that one passes.
Why is it that you're running the server in another Go routine? Why can't you just run it so that it becomes a blocking call? Because when you run in a Go routine, it will not become a blocking call. It will run somewhere in the background.
I know, but we're starting to go down a rabbit hole there because this was all working before. This is all completely working before. So something that I've done has changed this. I mean, we can do that if you want. I don't know. I don't think that's going to solve it, but if it does, I'll be very happy. Yeah, so it's just timing out now, not doing anything.
Okay.
So what we need to do is find what's running on port 8085 and shut it down. So we'll just hit it once again. I did find this. This does actually ring a bit of a bell. When I was doing a bit of work on this project before, I had to kind of either restart my machine or reset things. There's some funny thing where, yeah, well, I'm not going to start messing around with that on the stream. We're just going to waste time. So we'll run the test individually for now. So let's go back to where we were. So we were this test. Okay, so that passes. And this test. And that passes. Okay. So that's a bit annoying. So what we wanted to do was test out this middleware and see if we could get that working. And so I'm going to unstash the changes I had, git stash apply. And we'll run this. We'll see if it passes. And it does. Okay, we'll run this, see if this passes. And it does. Okay, cool. So the next thing that we want to do is put something in this admin middleware. And the something wants to abort if the user roles are empty. So we're going to call this. I'm just going to copy and paste this up here. Okay. Get user roles. It needed user. Aha. So we need to call this. So it needed user. It needed args. So now I'm getting the whole kitchen sink, aren't I? Where are args? Args are here. Get user or username or email params. Okay, interesting. And now what is a claim? Gosh, claim is here. Now at this point, I'm going to say, I'm pulling in way too much stuff here. I want to pull in the user ID. And I remember as getting the user ID from this. This middleware already sets the user ID. So we're going to say,
what if your middleware takes a context and then checks if the context has
I think that's what we need to do. I think. And we go user ID there. And then we'll just get rid of that. Oh, we can't get rid of it because it's going to complain, isn't it? So
yeah, you can replace it with an empty variable. just go back to the code we had, and then the roles ID, you replace it with an empty variable.
Well, I think I'm just going to do that. It doesn't like that. Okay. Kind of happy. Maybe. Syntax error. Oh yeah, that's because I've missed out brackets, silly boy. On that parentheses. Okay, cool. It could not make request end of file. Unexpected call. Now this is exactly what, like 20 minutes ago, I wanted to make this point. So it's taken us 20 minutes to get to the point, but this is the point. We've got an unexpected call to a third get user roles. Now the behavior of the system hasn't changed at this point. Hasn't changed at all, right? It doesn't matter whether the length of the user roles is 0 or not. We're still doing the next middleware and it's coming down into the handler. If you were running this in Postman or on your machine, the behavior wouldn't have changed at all. We've done a harmless refactor. And yet the test is blowing up and saying, oh, the system's wrong. But it's not wrong, it's fine. And this is exactly why mocks are a bad idea, because it's coupling it. So now, in order to calm it down, we now need to go in here and add a third one in, right? Because it's calling it 3 times now. And that's not what we want to do. In a production system, we don't want to continually be going into all our tests and having to update them for no reason at all. And the reason is just because the mocks are testing. I like to joke that mocks test the code that you wrote is the code you wrote. What you're saying is, did I wrote these 3 lines? Did I write these 3 lines? I expect it to be this, this, and this called 3 times. I don't really care whether they're called 3 times, 4 times, 6 times, 1 time, 0 times. I want the system to work. That's what I care about. And when the pressure's on and a customer is screaming at you, you don't want to be fiddling around with, oh, what method did I call? And that's the implementation details. What you want to know is, does my system work? And there's a whole bunch of alternatives to mocks. But I want to finish this refactoring and push the functionality into this must-be admin middleware. So we're just going to make sure the other test passes as well. It fails. I wonder why. I wonder why. Because guess why? It's calling it 3 times as well. So now I have to run it again. I have to change it again. I have to run it again. And now that passes. But now if you look at the code diff, okay, fine, we've got it passing, but look at what we've had to do it. We've had to this line here, we've had to this add this line here. We shouldn't have had to change those tests at all. The tests were fine, and yet we've had to change them. And this is coupling. This is the bad kind of coupling that you do not want. You pull on this thread here, and all these 6 tests now fail. Now you have to go through all 6, updating them. You make a little refactor over here. Oh no, 16 tests break that are all coupled the implementation details. And now you're spending hours and hours and hours that has no value to any customer. No customer cares whether you're using mocks, stubs. They don't even know what they are. They just want their system to work, right? And so do we. So we're going to, this is a refactor. We've moved authentication into the middleware, and we only have time. I may just be going 5 minutes over here, but we're going to, this middleware currently is doing nothing, right? And we want to push the functionality into the middleware. So we want to say when the user roles are 0, we don't want to say call the next middleware and everything's peachy and we can all go home and have a laugh. We want to say, no, we want to stop. We want to send a message back to the client saying, sorry, it's a bad request. So I'm going to take heavy inspiration, read, copy and paste what we had before in here. If len roles is equal to 0, we're going to do context JSON 401. You don't have permission to access this resource. I think there's a slightly different syntax for it that I've spotted, but we need to abort with status JSON, in fact. So let's do that. The status is status bad request. Sorry, it's not status bad request.
Unauthorized.
Unauthorized, exactly. Which will be 401 status unauthorized. Boom. And then maybe we'll take this string. Okay. It's not screaming at me. Okay.
Do we really need the return statement there? Because I think abort with JSON is already returning.
Okay, well, that's a small refactor. Let's keep focused on making this pass. So someone who is not an admin, then it should return unauthorized. So I don't know if we're running this. So I'll run that. That passes. Make sure this passes. Okay, awesome. So now we get to clean up, hopefully, our production code. So I'm hoping we can get rid of all of this nonsense here. Oh, no. No. I've gone too far, haven't I? We still need the user ID. It's just we're not doing this roles thing. We're not checking the user's roles because that's up to the middleware now. Let's see if it works. Deep breath, everybody. Hey, that works. This works. And let's just double check this again. I forget which one I've run. High five, everybody. So what have we done here? We've removed all of that authorization nonsense from this handler, and we've pushed it into the middleware. And now this middleware, here's the cool thing, my friends. This middleware is now pluggable into any other route we want. This little bit here, if we want this one here, if we want them to be able to download a payment request, but they've got to be an admin to do it, guess what we do? We don't bother going into here and going, oh, how do we do it? Copy and paste code, copy and paste code. No. That's for mugs. That's a mugs game, as they say in the UK. You just do that. Boom. Now you've got admin blocking on that endpoint. Super cool, right? This is composability. I've showed you coupling, what you don't want. You don't want to pull one thing and the whole house of cards collapse. What you do want is, this is the opposite of coupling in a way. This is nice little Lego bricks that compose. I want it to block admins. Take this Lego brick over here, snap it into here, done. And I don't ever have to go in here and write any code. That's a cool thing. I just take, oh, I want admin middleware there. Boom, done. I want admin in all these 16 routes. Boom, done. And what I've not told you is that you can, like if you wanted admin middleware here, here's another super cool trick. You do admin routes. And I love this because I work with Ruby a lot and Ruby doesn't have this. Not sure we need to do a router group. I think we can just do auth routes. Yeah. I don't know about the group actually. Right, so you go auth routes, use, must be middleware, admin middleware, and you assign that to a variable, right? And then you do this, admin routes. Admin routes. Now you can add any number of admin routes that you want just onto this one variable. And every single admin route will get that same behavior. No more copying, pasting, no more, oh, this bit is different and this is authentication and authorizing in a different way. Does that make sense, Clariel? Does it make sense, Baron?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
So this is what we want. We want small Lego bricks that are composable. And this is how teams achieve velocity. This is how teams move fast, is by building quality. These little Lego bricks that you can plug together. So let's just make sure that still runs. This was not a very wise idea. I wouldn't normally do this in a production bit of code because I've now changed the functionality of this download request, which is, you know, if you run that download test now, it's maybe broken. So I'm just going to flick it back to auth roots. Look at how easy that was. We just restored the original functionality by renaming a variable, basically. Super cool, super cool. And I'm just going to put a little comment here saying admin roots. So it's clear these two are admin roots. These are just normal roots. And I wouldn't call it auth roots either. I would rename this to be logged in roots. That's the only requirement. Oh. Yeah, that's the only requirement. What's that, sorry?
I said, why change it to logged in roots instead of auth?
Right. What does auth mean to you? Hey, I'm going down the shop and I'm going to get you some auth. Would you like some auth? Have some auth. I'm going to auth you. You wouldn't ever say that in real life. Not in a million years. You said that to your friends. Are you authed into that site? Hey, auth into that site for me. They just think you were balmy. You want to speak in English. You want your code to express it in English. Are you logged into that site? Of course, you would say that to anyone. And they didn't understand what you mean. And it's business terminology. This is where you get into DDD and ubiquitous language and all this kind of jazz. It's a very, very small tweak towards that. We can go much, much hardcore. But I love these names here. Create petty. I don't love create petty cache, to be honest, but petty cache, you're not creating cache from nothing. I'm guessing you're creating a petty cache request or petty cache transfer or whatever. But the fact that we've got petty cache is wonderful because that's a business level thing. I could go to a cafe owner and say, do you have some petty cache? They'd understand what I mean. We wouldn't be calling it middleware. If you went to, now middleware is a bit of a bad example, but admin roots, logged in roots. So what I'm trying to do here is starting to build up a pattern of language that is very expressive. So I can read the code and it says auth roots. I'm looking at that going, I don't, auth what? Auth who? Auth how? Versus looking at that saying, oh, this means they need to be logged in. I get it. I've obsessed for the last 15 years about names, absolutely obsessed. I asked for some feedback from a colleague once and he said, yeah, I love working with you, but it would be nice if you spent a little less time thinking up good names. I said, I don't spend that much time, do I? And he said, there was one time we spent an entire afternoon thinking of one name. I was like, come on, it wasn't an afternoon. It was an hour. It was a couple of hours. But either way, I'd like to spend a lot of time thinking about names because the moment you've written that name there, you write software once, you read it 100 times. It's way more important to think a bit more, put a bit more energy in now, and then that will save you endless amounts of time in the future. Having said all of that, blah, 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 I'm wondering if the test still pass. That one does. It makes me incredibly nervous, not just being able to run them all, but I didn't want to spend time fiddling around trying to get that server thing working. I can do that in my own time. Okay, looks like it's working. So we're going to commit. Now I've been a bit naughty here. I wouldn't normally do this much work in one commit. I've changed the name of this. I've put this into admin roots. It's a bit too much all at one go. Wonder if there's any way I could commit this in a smaller chunk. I think I probably could. Let's commit the name changes that we've made in the roots file into one commit. So refactor improved names. And then we're going to commit. This is super cool. You can see we've got rid of it from the production code. And it's moved, that functionality has been pushed into our middleware, just in case you need a reminder of what we've done there. We want to remove complexity from being repeated all over the place. In like this endpoint shouldn't have to know about that stuff. And we want to push it into something a lot more cross-cutting that can be now reused with any other endpoint. And that's what we've done, #smug. So this is a refactor, and this is super important. It's a refactor because it's a structural change. We have not changed the behavior. If you change the behavior, I see people all the time saying, I'm going to refactor this code and add a new feature. I'm going to refactor it so it works differently. That's nonsense. Refactoring is the structure of the system. It's not the behavior. You do one or the other. Every commit should be one or the other. Either restructure it or change the behavior, but not both. So refactor and push authorization into middleware. And I do apologize, Byron, I never got to your question. I will make you a video. I'll make you a little Loom video. Clarissa has already experienced my Loom videos. So I'll make you a little Loom video because it's way too much detail to go into on a live stream with just some of the alternatives. And I can go into detail on nullable architecture, which I think is pretty cool. It's one of the best testing ideas I've heard about in about 10 years. And I'm always on the lookout for new ways and better ways of testing, because I think most tests are absolutely appalling. It's really difficult to get good tests. Before we go, I think all of these three now are no longer necessary. Maybe. I'm hoping we can get rid of one of them at least. Yeah, we can. And one of them here, maybe. I'm going to push my luck and try and get rid of all but one of them. I don't think that's going to work. Yeah, sadly. It does call get user roles twice. It calls it in the get current user middleware, and then it calls it again in our admin. So it's plenty to work out there in a future stream. Any questions before we go? We are 8 minutes over, so thank you for your time and your patience. No, I didn't like that. Back to green. Yeah, remove unnecessary. Remove code. Okay. We'll just, yeah, revert that. Don't know how to do that. All back. Yeah, cool. All right then. So tune in next week where we will have, I think we'll do another session on Byron's code, and then we'll move on to something else. I appreciate you both. Thank you both for your time and attention. And I will speak to you both next week, hopefully, if you can make it.